It started with an old man in scuffed shoes stepping into the marble-lit lobby of the most luxurious hotel in Manhattan. No entourage, no designer watch, no name tag. Just a quiet dignity in the way he moved, the kind that made you look twice, even if you didn't know why. The receptionist didn't look twice. She barely looked once. Her eyes flicked up, her nose twitched, and then her hand reached for the phone. Within seconds, 2 towering security guards approached, flanking him like he was a threat, not a guest. One of them tilted his head, smirking. "Sir, you're not allowed to loiter here," he said, voice dripping with authority that didn't come from wisdom, but a walkie-talkie. The old man didn't flinch. "I'm here to meet a guest," he said politely, his southern drawl soft but firm. "My name is John Kennedy." The name bounced off their ears like it meant nothing. The guards didn't even pretend to check a list. Instead, they grabbed his arm, not hard, but hard enough to humiliate. Guests in the lobby began to turn their heads. A few chuckled. A woman in a sequined dress muttered, "Who let that guy in here?" Someone pulled out a phone to film, snickering. And just like that, John Kennedy, former decorated military advisor, now a retired senator, was being dragged toward the glass doors like a trespasser. He didn't resist. He didn't explain. That would have been easy. But he knew the room had already decided who he was. And then, the crowd parted. A voice echoed from the stairwell, loud, confident, unmistakable. "What the hell is going on?" The energy shifted like a record scratch. People turned to see him. Yeah, dressed in a custom silver suit, surrounded by bodyguards and a cloud of ego. He took one look at Kennedy and burst into laughter. "This some kind of prank?" he said, pointing. "Is he lost? Or are we doing charity cosplay tonight?" The guards hesitated. Kennedy stood upright, breathing slow, eyes level. "I'm here to meet with the investment group," he said. "We had a scheduled meeting at noon." Ye raised his brows, amused. "Scheduled? With who, Moses?" The crowd laughed with him, like it was a scene from a late-night show. "Escort this man out before he embarrasses himself further," Ye added, waving a dismissive hand. Kennedy didn't argue. He didn't need to. But just before the guards moved again, a small voice rang out from the edge of the lobby. "I'm recording this." It came from a hotel intern, no more than 19, standing behind the concierge desk. Her phone was raised, hands shaking slightly but steady enough to capture every smug grin, every insult, every second of public humiliation. Ye turned toward her. "And you're fired," he said coldly. "Go TikTok your unemployment." But she didn't lower her phone. She didn't blink. And for a split second you could feel it, the shift in the air, the uncertainty in the crowd. The laughter died. The room felt colder. Kennedy turned slowly, locking eyes with the girl. He gave her the smallest nod, almost imperceptible. And then he stepped through the glass doors, disappearing into the blinding daylight like a man walking off the edge of a cliff, but with purpose. What no one in that lobby knew was this. Behind a frosted glass door on the mezzanine level, someone had seen everything. Someone who recognized John Kennedy the moment he stepped inside. Someone whose entire life had once been changed because of that very man. But that part of the story, the part that no one expected, was still waiting to unfold. If you're still listening, and you feel what just happened in that lobby should never happen to anyone based on how they look, I want you to hit like and comment 9 right now. Because what comes next will prove that dignity can't be dragged, and respect can't be bought. The hotel lobby buzzed with whispers as the glass doors slowly swung shut behind Senator John Kennedy. Outside, the hum of New York traffic swallowed him, but inside, the atmosphere was still electric, trembling with the aftershock of what had just happened. A few guests were still chuckling, unsure whether they had just witnessed performance art or something real. Others had turned quiet, their phones suddenly heavier in their hands. Ye remained near the center of the room, basking in the attention like a performer who'd just delivered the punchline of a killer joke. But his smile was already beginning to slip. Something was off. The air was too still, too tense. The teenage intern still stood behind the concierge desk, her phone raised, recording with the silent defiance of someone who knew what this footage could mean. Her name was Riley, a journalism student working part-time to make rent. She didn't plan on being a hero that day, but something in the way Kennedy stood, dignified, still, not broken, ignited something in her. The guests might forget this moment. The internet wouldn't. As Ye strutted past her, he sneered and said, "Delete that or security will delete you from the building." But Riley didn't move. She didn't even blink. Upstairs, behind a frosted glass panel in a soundproof VIP suite, a man had watched everything unfold. CEO Marcus Weller, founder of the very hotel chain where this chaos was playing out, had been preparing for his own meeting with Kennedy, the very one Ye had just derailed. Weller hadn't seen the senator in over 15 years. Back then, Kennedy had been instrumental in helping Weller's hometown recover after a devastating flood. No cameras, no headlines, just quiet, stubborn work. Marcus never forgot. And now, watching the man who once saved his family's livelihood get publicly humiliated by a celebrity guest with too much power and too little decency, something in Marcus cracked. He didn't say a word to his assistant. He didn't call security. He simply stood, buttoned his blazer, and walked toward the elevator with the heavy gait of a man who knew he was about to flip an entire building on its head. Outside, Kennedy sat calmly on a bench near the valet, hands folded, eyes scanning the skyline. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He was processing. Years in public service had taught him not to react in moments like this. But even he couldn't deny the sting of being dragged like a stray dog in a place where he'd been invited. Still, the sting wasn't for himself. It was for the culture that allowed it, for the people who never got a second glance, for the ones without cameras or names. Meanwhile, inside the hotel ballroom, Ye was already bragging about the incident, spinning it like a joke. Dude looked like he time-traveled from a thrift store. "What was I supposed to do?" he said, sipping from a crystal tumbler. His fans laughed on cue. Influencers nodded, hoping to stay in his orbit. No one noticed the ballroom doors open. No one heard Marcus Weller step inside until he took the microphone from the stage's side panel and spoke with the calm, booming tone of a man who didn't need to raise his voice to own a room. "I'd like to say a few words," Marcus began, eyes locked on Ye. The room froze. Ye blinked, confused at first, then annoyed. We're kinda in the middle of a thing here, Marcus," he said with a forced chuckle. But Marcus didn't flinch. "Yeah," he said. "You were, and you just humiliated one of the most respected men I've ever met." Ye rolled his eyes. "That guy? That was some dusty old—" Marcus cut him off. "That was Senator John Kennedy, and he was invited here by me, not you, not security. Me." A heavy silence dropped like a curtain. Phones came out again, but now they were pointed at Marcus, at Ye, at the tension cracking open in real time. Marcus stepped forward. "This hotel stands for something. Dignity, integrity, respect, not fashion, not followers, and certainly not insults shouted across the lobby at men who've given more to this country than some of us will in a lifetime." Ye stammered. "Come on, it's not that serious." But Marcus raised a hand. "You mocked a guest. You ordered him dragged out. You threatened an intern. And you did it all while pretending you were the biggest man in the room. You're not. Guests began murmuring. Some backed toward the exit. Others opened Twitter. The energy was shifting again. But this time, it wasn't curiosity or entertainment. It was accountability. Marcus turned to the AV team. Put the lobby feed on the ballroom screen. The giant LED wall flickered, and there it was. Kennedy's quiet grace, Ye's mockery, Riley's shaking hands holding her phone. The sound echoed through the room like thunder. Ye took a step back, jaw clenched. This is a hit job. No, Marcus said, voice like iron. This is a mirror. And for the first time all day, Ye had nothing to say. What would you have done if you were in that lobby? Would you have stood up? Or would you have laughed with the crowd? If you believe dignity should never be mistaken for weakness, share your voice in the comments. Let them know. Let the world know. Outside, the soft rumble of traffic continued, unaware that a quiet storm was unraveling inside the marble walls of the most prestigious hotel in the city. Senator John Kennedy still sat at the edge of the valet curb, watching pedestrians pass with that unshakable calm only age and integrity could forge. He wasn't checking his phone, wasn't pacing or fuming. He was waiting. Not for an apology, he didn't expect one, but for the truth to rise, as it always did. And it was already starting. Back inside the ballroom, silence hung like smoke after an explosion. The massive LED screen continued looping the security footage, freezing on Ye's smirk, then Kennedy's still, unshaken expression. Some guests looked away, others stared, uncomfortable but mesmerized. Phones were no longer just tools for content. They had become shields, weapons, and witnesses. In the center of it all, Ye stood frozen, caught between ego and exposure. But he didn't back down. Not yet. I didn't know who he was, Ye muttered, arms crossed, eyes darting. He looked like, he didn't look like someone important. That was it. The line. The sentence that tore the last thread holding public sympathy together. From the back of the ballroom, a woman stood. Not famous. Not dressed in glitter or draped in designer threads. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut clear through the still air. You don't get to decide who's important by the way they look. The room turned toward her. It was Riley, the intern, still holding her phone, still filming. Her hands didn't shake now. She wasn't just recording history, she was stepping into it. Ye laughed nervously. Okay, now the interns are unionizing? But it wasn't funny anymore. The crowd had changed. There was no laughter, no applause, just stares. Cold, steady, judgmental. The kind of looks Ye used to give others, now returned in full force. And standing near the ballroom door was Marcus Weller, the hotel CEO, watching it all unfold like a chess master who had already seen the endgame. Marcus stepped forward once more, this time without a microphone. He didn't need one. The room leaned in to hear him. John Kennedy came here today for a private meeting about a community investment fund I'm launching. He didn't ask for a spotlight. He didn't demand anything. He showed up like he always does, on time, humble, and ready to help. He turned toward Ye, locking eyes. And you turned him into a circus act because you couldn't recognize decency unless it was wearing designer shoes. The weight of the moment pressed on every chest in the room. Then came the final blow. Marcus turned to the projectionist. Run the door feed. A new video began playing, footage from the hallway outside the ballroom. It showed the moment Kennedy had been escorted out. It showed Ye laughing, throwing out insults. But most importantly, it showed Marcus, watching from behind the frosted glass, unseen, his face turning from confusion to shock to quiet, controlled fury. A real-time timestamp proved everything. This wasn't a reaction. It had been a choice, a calculated one. The camera cut to the lobby again. Kennedy, stepping outside without a fight. And then, pause. A still image, a moment of perfect visual poetry, his finger pointing, Kennedy's eyes meeting his. One man weaponizing power, the other restraining it. The screen went black. And then applause, not thunderous, not theatrical, just a slow, growing swell from the back of the room to the front, a ripple of human decency washing over a room that had, moments ago, forgotten what it meant. Ye stood motionless, his confidence leaking out of him like air from a punctured balloon. This wasn't just about Kennedy anymore. It was about every time he'd treated someone like background noise. And now, the crowd, once his fans, followers, allies, stood silent, some stepping back, others looking him in the eye with the kind of clarity that only comes after the truth lands. He tried to speak. I didn't mean it like that. But Marcus raised a hand, stopping him. Then, slowly, he turned to the room. We all like to say we do the right thing when it counts. But the truth is, most people stay quiet when it's inconvenient. Not today. He pointed toward the exit. Mr. Ye, your event is cancelled. Your access to this venue is revoked. Please leave. No security, no shoving, just the weight of being asked to walk away by someone who truly owned the room. Ye hesitated. For the first time, he looked small. Not because he lacked stature, but because he had lost the room. And in that moment, he knew it. He turned, walked toward the exit, passing Riley, who held her phone at chest level now, no longer filming, just standing. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She just looked at him, and he looked away. And in that silence, the echoes of every person who had ever been overlooked, humiliated, or dismissed for not fitting the mold could be heard. What would you have done if you were standing in that ballroom? Would you have spoken up? Or stood back in silence? Drop a comment and tell us where you would have stood. Because sometimes, the most powerful statement is simply refusing to stay silent. The heavy doors of the ballroom closed behind Ye with a hushed finality, like a stage curtain falling on a show that went off script. Outside, the hallway stood still, eerily quiet. His footsteps echoed off polished marble, each one slower than the last, as if the weight of what had just happened began pressing down on his shoulders. He didn't look up. He didn't speak. And for the first time in recent memory, he didn't have an audience. Inside, the room hadn't yet returned to normal. Guests didn't rush to the bar or check their phones. Instead, they stood in small, stunned clusters, people who had come for a networking event, but now felt like they had witnessed something far more human, far more real. The screen was off, but the images lingered in their minds. John Kennedy being judged, John Kennedy being dismissed, John Kennedy walking away without raising his voice. The contrast between dignity and ego had never been so stark. Riley still stood off to the side, her phone now resting by her side. Marcus Weller approached her, slow and steady, and for a moment she braced herself, thinking she might be scolded for filming. Instead, he extended his hand. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You reminded this place what integrity looks like." Riley blinked, unsure how to respond. "I just didn't want it to disappear," she said. "If someone didn't record it, it would have been like it never happened." Marcus nodded. But it did, and now the whole world knows. Outside, Senator John Kennedy was still seated where he had been, legs crossed, head bowed slightly, not in defeat, but in reflection. A car had pulled up to the valet for him minutes ago, but he hadn't moved. He watched the sky as if it held answers to questions he hadn't asked in years. A security guard approached nervously, unsure how to speak after what had just gone down. "Sir, Mr. Weller would like to see you upstairs now, if you'd still be willing." Kennedy looked up slowly, his gaze as calm as a winter lake. "I never left," he said, standing up with a quiet strength that somehow made the security guard feel 2 feet shorter. Inside the elevator, the silence was heavy but peaceful. As the floors ticked upward, the senator folded his hands in front of him. "You know," he said to no one in particular, "the most dangerous kind of power isn't the kind that screams. It's the kind that believes it never has to answer to anyone." The doors opened, and there stood Marcus Weller, waiting. Not like a CEO greeting a guest, but like a friend welcoming someone back home. "Senator," he said warmly, "I owe you an apology, and a thank you." Kennedy extended a hand. "No need for apologies. You saw what mattered." Marcus gestured to the room behind him, one of the private lounges, now empty, quiet, and sunlit. "Let's sit. There's something I want to show you." On a coffee table lay a worn leather folder. Inside were documents, photographs, blueprints, plans for a community investment initiative that Kennedy had quietly helped draft months earlier. Marcus flipped it open to a handwritten note, signed by Kennedy, outlining ideas for local outreach centers, housing support, and youth education programs. "This," Marcus said, "is why you came. And this is what we're going to do." Kennedy's eyes softened. "That's all I ever hoped for," he said. "Not applause, not headlines, just movement in the right direction." Downstairs, the energy shifted. Word had already begun to spread online. Riley's video, raw, unedited, and painfully honest, had been uploaded. Within 30 minutes, it hit 1 million views. Twitter threads exploded. TikTok comment sections flooded with outrage and admiration. Memes were born, not of mockery, but of poetic justice. One clip of Kennedy saying, "Respect isn't something you wear, it's something you give," became an instant classic. Sponsors who had once backed Yo's appearance at the hotel began withdrawing support. News outlets picked up the story. Think pieces started rolling in. But most importantly, messages poured into Kennedy's office. Emails, letters, comments from people saying they'd felt overlooked, ignored, judged for how they looked or where they came from. For them, this wasn't just a viral moment. It was a mirror. Back in the private lounge, Marcus handed Kennedy a flash drive. "Every camera in the hotel," he said. "Every angle. Yours to use however you see fit." Kennedy took it, held it for a moment. "What happened today," he said, "wasn't about revenge. It was about memory. Because the next time someone like me walks into a place like this, I want them to be remembered for who they are, not how they appear." He stood to leave, his steps slow but certain. Before exiting, he turned back and added, "And Marcus, thank you for standing up when it counted. A lot of people wait until it's safe. You didn't." Marcus smiled, but it was Riley who spoke from the doorway, her voice small but steady. "It's only safe after someone else goes first." And maybe that's what the world needed. Less silence, more firsts. If you believe the way someone dresses or looks should never determine how they're treated, leave a comment below. Because change doesn't begin in conference rooms. It begins in lobbies, sidewalks, and the hearts of people who decide they've seen enough. The next morning, the world looked different. Not in the grand, apocalyptic way people always imagine, but in the quiet, irreversible way truth changes everything. Overnight, Riley's video had exploded beyond anything she or anyone expected. 10 million views, trending in multiple countries. News anchors dissected the clip frame by frame. Op-eds spilled out of every media outlet. But more powerful than all that was the wave of personal stories flooding comment sections from strangers, security guards, single moms, veterans, teachers, janitors, people who had once been pushed aside for looking out of place. Now, they had a voice, and they had someone to point to. Senator John Kennedy sat in a modest chair across from a morning show host, his posture relaxed but dignified, the very image of quiet strength. The clip of him being removed from the hotel had played before his segment, followed by footage of Marcus Weller's speech and Ye's walk of shame. The host leaned forward, clearly moved. "Senator, I think the world is still catching up to what happened that day. Can you tell us what was going through your mind when they pulled you out like that?" Kennedy didn't blink. "I thought about my father," he said, his voice smooth, low. "He used to tell me, a man shows his character not when he's in control, but when he's being tested. That day I didn't lose anything. The man who dragged me out, he lost the chance to learn something." The host nodded slowly. "Some people are calling this a turning point in how we treat dignity, how we define respect. Do you think it'll last?" Kennedy gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Only if we keep the conversation alive, and if we stop confusing confidence with cruelty." Meanwhile, in a penthouse apartment across the city, Ye sat slouched on a velvet couch, sunglasses hiding a face that now had nowhere left to hide. The internet had done what it does best, magnified every second of his downfall and burned it into public memory. Brand sponsors had issued statements distancing themselves. An event tour was postponed indefinitely. His PR team suggested silence. But silence wasn't what haunted him. It was that final image, Kennedy walking away without saying a word. That somehow was louder than anything Ye had ever shouted. Back at the hotel, Marcus Weller was overseeing the early stages of a new plan. He had announced the launch of a new initiative, the Kennedy Room, a permanent space inside the hotel for public service events, workshops for underprivileged youth, and training on workplace dignity. The announcement went viral. Not because it was flashy, but because it was necessary and real. Riley was asked to speak at the press launch. Nervous at first, she cleared her throat and faced the cameras. "I didn't record that moment to go viral," she said, her voice still finding its footing. "I recorded it because I was tired of watching the wrong people decide who mattered and who didn't. If that video changed something, then maybe we all have more power than we think." In the crowd, Kennedy listened quietly. He wasn't the center of attention anymore, and he didn't want to be. That day had never been about him. It had been about something much older, deeper, more permanent than his name or title. It had been about the way people carry themselves when no one's watching, and how they treat others when everyone is. Later that afternoon, as he packed up to return home, Kennedy was approached by a hotel employee, a young man in housekeeping uniform, maybe 21, eyes uncertain. "Sir," he said, voice low, "can I just say, I've never seen someone handle a moment like that. Most people would have yelled or fought. You just stood there." Kennedy placed a gentle hand on the young man's shoulder. "Sometimes standing still is the loudest thing you can do." That night, a new video made the rounds. Not a confrontation, not a takedown, just a short clip someone captured of Kennedy outside the hotel, helping an elderly woman carry her bags to a cab. No cameras, no press, just kindness in motion. It got a fraction of the views Riley's video did, but those who saw it shared it with captions like, "Now I understand," or "This is the follow-up we needed." Because in the age of outrage and instant judgment, the story of Senator John Kennedy reminded people that grace under pressure isn't weakness, it's power in its purest form. And maybe that's the lesson we forget too easily, that being right isn't about being loud, that respect isn't owed, it's earned in moments when no one's keeping score. If you believe real strength comes from stillness, not showmanship, if you think it's time to change what leadership looks like, then hit like, share this story, and comment below. Because sometimes the world doesn't need a hero, it just needs someone to stay calm when everyone else is yelling. The days that followed didn't explode. They echoed. Like the final chord of a powerful symphony, the impact of what happened at the hotel didn't fade. It resonated. Across newsrooms, coffee shops, classrooms, and comment sections, people weren't just talking about the moment Senator John Kennedy was thrown out. They were talking about why it mattered. Not because of who he was, but because of what he represented, how easily society misjudges character by clothing, how quickly ego can humiliate dignity, and how rare it is for someone to choose composure over revenge. Kennedy didn't bask in the attention. He returned to his daily life quietly, answering letters from community members, checking in with veterans organizations, reviewing proposals for rural housing initiatives. But something had shifted. His name had become more than a trending topic. It had become a symbol, not of power, but of restraint. Not of status, but of stillness. At the hotel, the Kennedy Room opened its doors just 1 week after the incident. Its walls were simple, lined with local artwork and quotes about compassion, humility, and service. No gold plaques, no portraits, just stories. On one wall was a screen looping Riley's video, unedited, uninterrupted, next to a sign that read, "Never forget how easy it is to look away." People came. Not tourists, not elites. Everyday people. A single mother who had once been turned away for wearing jeans in a fine restaurant. A delivery driver who'd been asked to use the back entrance. A former teacher who was once mistaken for a janitor during a school board meeting. Each visitor left a message in the guest book, some handwritten, some typed on a touchscreen display. All of them spoke to the same longing, to be seen for who they are, not who they appear to be. One morning, Riley stood in the Kennedy Room alone. She walked slowly, absorbing every word on the walls, every signature in the guest book. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Kennedy's assistant. "Senator would like to meet you, if you're available." She hesitated, then typed, "Tell him I'd be honored." They met on a park bench in Central Park later that afternoon. No cameras, no speeches, just two people who had accidentally become part of a story bigger than either of them expected. Kennedy wore the same jacket he'd worn that day at the hotel. Riley noticed a tear near the sleeve, but didn't mention it. It somehow made him more human. "I'm not used to all this," she admitted. "People calling me brave. I was scared. I almost didn't press record." Kennedy looked out at the lake, hands folded. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," he said. "It's what you do despite it. You didn't freeze. You didn't walk away. You acted. That's more than most." Riley smiled, unsure how to respond. After a moment, she asked, "Do you think things will really change?" He took a long breath. "Not all at once. Change doesn't show up in headlines. It shows up in habits. But this? What you did? What we all learned? It's a start. And sometimes, the start is the most powerful part." They sat in silence for a while, watching the world move. Children running, dogs barking, leaves drifting in the breeze. Life, unbothered and unfiltered. Before they parted, Kennedy handed her a folded slip of paper. "Something my father gave me once," he said. Riley unfolded it slowly. It read, "Be the kind of person who makes others remember their better self." That night, Riley framed it and hung it above her desk. The story didn't end with a press conference. It didn't end with a lawsuit or a new hashtag. It ended exactly how it began, with quiet actions that spoke louder than anger ever could. And in that silence, something powerful took root. Because dignity doesn't demand attention, it earns respect. Because integrity doesn't scream, it stands. And sometimes, the best way to fight back is not to swing, but to stay still and let the truth speak louder than anything else. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that the smallest actions can create the biggest ripples, then share it. Comment below what dignity means to you, because maybe the real change doesn't come from those in charge, but from people like you who choose to see what others overlook.